afternoon, good evening, the ones that are uh, on uh, on European time. I'm so happy to hear that everything seems to be working properly. Um, Obviously, first of all, we are very sorry for the inconvenience last week. We were all here, Jennifer and Greg, prepared to give uh, I think a very nice talk, and unfortunately we have some technical difficulties. But anyways, it was such a humbling experience. Let's put it like that. And I felt like in my old times when I used to run triathlon, uh, to take the decision about abandoning this table, it felt for me like abandoning a triathlon, abandoning a race, something that I hate. So here we are. And before starting today's table, I would like to introduce a little bit about the spirit of this series. When the vice president of the Global Legal Tech Hub and myself, we were discussing, we were brainstorming about a series and the market needs about generative AI and all the talks and all the fuss that was going on. We said, okay, actually, uh, these things, we cannot solve the needs of everybody in just one talk. We have to create like a series of events and build a community on top of these events. Because first of all, Global Legal Tech Hub, it's a community. And that's why probably you are still here with a lot of patience after last week technical difficulties. So building this community takes time, but the advantage is that actually um, everything we've seen about generative AI and all the acceleration that is going on the market actually is just the beginning. We can say it's just the beginning. And the ones that are going to have success are the ones that work together and especially put their house in order to benefit from all these technologies. So the series, we were thinking something like that, starting today, obviously with the practical overview about what's going on the market and what's the impact on the legal services industry. Then we were thinking on Wednesday, we are going to be talking about how to get our data ready. Most of us are thinking about how to enrich these models with our own data, maybe, and what it means getting our data ready. Then we were thinking about practical applications. The following tables will be about practical applications for law firms, and the following about access to justice. And if everything goes according to the plan, um, we would love to see everybody and to meet everybody in person during the Global Legal Tech Hub Day that has been recently announced, and it's going to be on the 25th and 26th of October. So if everything goes right, we are going to be building momentum and knowledge, and we are going to, let's say, not finish the discussion, but recap some of the discussions during the event live. So you're going to see also during the full series a very hands-on approach, a very practical approach. Why? Because obviously it's okay to listen to a lot of talks and read a lot of materials that everybody's publishing, but our approach and our advice will be always try. Try you can try by yourself. This is actually, most of us, we started as consumer, we realized the potential of all these applications, and then eventually we started to think how to apply this knowledge to our practices, to our business. It's going to be that approach, very hands-on approach. Finally, a little bit about myself before introducing today's table. I I can say that I'm passionate about information services. I used to be a lawyer by training. I survived the first big migration of books to online, so the print to online migration. I survived that migration working for big publishing groups like LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters. And then I joined in 2019 a big law firm in north of Italy, where I'm doing legal tech adoption. That's a little bit about myself. Moving forward to today's discussion. So first of all, you're going to see with Greg and Jennifer a table that would like to answer quick, one key question. Sorry, why do I need to be paying attention to all these generative AI discussions? Why is it for me? What's the impact on my work? And it's a very hard challenge what my colleagues are going to have today, because Global Legal Tech Hub is made of very different personalities. So we have big law firms, probably here many of you are from big law firms or from corporate departments, and for big publishers or for small startups that would like to launch their solutions into this market. So we have to provide an answer to all of you that are thinking, why should I care? What is it for me? And maybe what is it different from the past? Because artificial intelligence, and we are going to see soon, it's been it has taken a long time, the evolution. It didn't started in November 2022. So why is it different now? Why this acceleration? So that's all for me for today's introduction. I hope to see many of you in the following tables already next Wednesday, for instance. So I will leave to Greg and Jennifer to introduce themselves, and we are going to start this discussion. Let's say that we are starting with Greg today, because I would say, like Uncle Ben said once, with great power comes great responsibility. And you have, Greg, the responsibility to take us by hand and to do a recap of the last, let's say, 60, 70 years of computational developments on artificial intelligence, of course. Can you do that?
I'll do my best. We had the opportunity to rehearse a bit and to discuss it. And so first of all, good evening to everyone. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for the introduction, for welcoming us, and Albert and the team of the Global Legal Tech Hub for setting up this very, very interesting series around generative AI. So it goes a bit against all the rules of courtesy to go before Jennifer, but she's also want to highlight that she's far more knowledgeable than I am on artificial intelligence. But I have maybe the legal layer that I'll add on top of that, but I'm sure we'll have a great discussion ahead. Again, Jennifer, please do interrupt me if you hear anything that is very obviously very wrong on artificial intelligence. So
Thank you.
The whole purpose is really here to have a proper introduction on what it is, because it really feels like we just started discussing AI, just popped out of nowhere a couple of months ago. It's something that's been around for a while. Just a word about myself. I'm working for Wolters Kluwer, and I'm the global director for business enablement and product management in their legal software. I'm also the president of the European Legal Technology Association. Very close friends of the Legal Tech Hub, and delighted to be collaborating with Albert and the team. To get started, then let me share my screen. If maybe Alejandro, someone in the team could give me access to screen sharing, and we'll get started on this. Really, what is AI, and how can we? What are the different definitions that we have so far? Yeah, here it is. Thank you very much. So really around what is AI. Many different definitions, and I believe it's very hard to find the right definition about AI. My personal favorite is probably from the one who coined the term artificial intelligence, John McCarthy in '56, who said it was the science of engineering of making intelligent machines. Obviously, the subtle part is around intelligent machines, and this obviously covers very different meanings. And probably in 1956, even though McCarthy was really pioneer in that domain, it was very hard to define what intelligent machine could mean at some point. And obviously, because we all have in mind, that's more the science fiction part, the sentient machines that we have feelings, emotions, and can help. So that's maybe a bit the Arthur C. Clarke definition of any sufficiently advanced technology that is indistinguishable from magic, which is also a very nice one. But to be a bit more practical, we have obviously the Encyclopedia Britannica saying that it is the ability of a digital computer or a computer-controlled robot to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. We're far closer, I believe, to what we've been seeing, at least during the past couple of years, and we'll get close to generative AI, which is something very different. We're all lawyers. I'm myself a former lawyer, at least recovering lawyer, and obviously one of the definitions that's been developed recently is the one that we've seen with the European Commission on the regulation work that's been initiated 2 years ago already. And we're touching here something which is very interesting. As they say that it is software that is developed with one or more of the techniques and approaches for a given set of human-defined objectives, generate outputs such as content predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing the environments they interact with. What is really interesting with this definition is that it really introduces the distinction between general AI and we'll talk about that a bit more down the road, and a bit more narrow AI, which is really specific to certain domains that we've seen for some time already. But that's also very important to assess. I believe that we can say with a certain level of confidence, and speaking under the control of Jennifer here, that there is no general AI in the sentient term whatsoever in any foreseeable future, I believe. I see Jennifer nods, so we all agree on that part. So, and we'll get to the specifics of why does it feel, why does the anthropomorphic behavior of generative AI is very disturbing. For all the lawyers with you in the audience today, also very interesting part is that it's not so recent to be discussing the combination of AI and law. It's something that actually started in 1987. We found this first paper. So it was the agenda, the program of the first edition of this international conference on AI and law that took place in Boston in 1987. So obviously back then, what it meant is hard-coded decision trees. If something happens, then this is what happens, and next and next and next. So obviously, we could see artificial intelligence as very complex decision trees. It goes a bit beyond that. What is also interesting with AI is how we approach it. And obviously, the first time we had self-driven cars, engineers never tried to build a robot and would try to give him hands, arms, and legs, and try to change gears and behave pretty much as a human. They had something completely embedded in the car, and I believe that this is also what is happening right now. We're not trying to have some kind of a mimic. We're trying to obviously replicate some behaviors, but in a very different way. What has been AI for a while already is this ability to identify patterns in certain contexts. And that's really an important concept to understand, because this is how it started. We want to have it was a perfect match, and then progressively we want these machines to understand that a perfect match can be subtly different but still the same. And we want them to understand what this subtlety is. And we see in the legal industry, this is particularly specific because we have all this complexity of the language and the ability to write and to have this wonderful legalese, which actually is the ability to write exactly the same thing in a very different language. So obviously this makes this exercise extremely difficult for engines. So what we're trying to also get from these machines is not only to have a perfect match, but to have something a bit more, let's say, precise, to understand the context that goes with certain specific things, and to have this analogical reasoning. And I'll give a very legal example is if you're analyzing a contract and you're trying to find an export control clause in a contract that doesn't or has technology transfer. But the purpose is obviously very different because it makes the export control clause completely pointless. So how did it started? And here what is interesting is how AI was coined in 56, then progressively evolved with first level of machine learning starting around 1960s, and then we have a very long period of time with no really disruption in the world of AI until the early 2000s, where we started to have really the first level of deep learning. You may all the Kasparov chess games, and then the Go game, and all this acceleration starting really in the early 2000s until we all started to really understand what is deep learning, with all the Go games that we had, and word embedding in 2014, transfer learning in 18, and you see actually that the period of time is reducing between each disruptor. And what happened in 2020, because really GPT-3 was initiated in 2020, so a bit before we had this whole disruption and this public beta opening up to the public, which was in 2022. But something really, and here we have different categories. We have really this word-based, this hard-coded way of approaching analytics, which was until the early 2000s. Then we had a bit more of the grammar and semantics, if we apply to a legal word, let's say, and eventually not only extracting information, but getting to a point where we start actually generating output and not extracting information. This is a bit where we are now, with machines that do not only just say, this is where it is, but this is where it is, and this is what it says. And that's a bit maybe the difference that we have at this moment. Obviously, in the legal industry, making distinctions between different contents that look very much alike is extremely difficult. As much as this was, it's been a joke for AI engineers for a very long time and actually a real case to help machines make a distinction between a Chihuahua head and a blueberry muffin. It's pretty much the same thing for lawyers. AI engines had a very difficult time making the difference between, and for corporate lawyers, you'll understand that reference, but between tag-along and drag-along clauses. They're really drafted in very similar ways, and yet don't have at all the same consequences in a shareholding agreement, for example. So getting now to really what became this generative AI piece, it has a lot to do with the training set, and training sets have been a bit more private for a very long time for really, let's say, engines developed by specific corporations. The OpenAI projects, as it was called, it was an open initiative. It was open source until earlier this year, until Microsoft took some shares. I believe they have another open source side project now reopening, but it's been something that's been developed collectively. And the interesting part here is the amount of information that was thrown in there. We're talking about parameters, which are combinations of different, say a combination of words or questions, I would say. Or if Jennifer maybe has better definition of what is this combination of parameters, it's a bit complicated to explain. But the volume is extremely impressive because we went from really millions to thousands of millions here, and we're here at the level of data, which is pretty astonishing, especially with now GPT-4. This is really impressive. It hasn't, and I believe, Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but it hasn't completely absorbed the entire information from the World Wide Web, but it's very close to have browsing really a very, very large part of it. So obviously, these combinations are very impressive. Do you want to add something a bit here, Jennifer? Maybe.
No, not at all. You're doing amazingly.
Okay, and maybe one last part here, because the interesting aspect around generative AI is all the let's say the semantics that are that come along, and obviously we're talking about neural networks, and it may generate, and especially for lawyers, a bit of anxiety around all the vocabulary that comes along. So it's intelligent, and it's really behaving with neural networks. But an interesting comparison is how actually these neural networks work, and between really human cells and a human being, and what actually happens with a combination of parameters on the machine side. And there is pretty much the same level of comparison between a real human neural network and one from a machine that you have between a wing from a bird and a wing from a plane. It's pretty much the same thing. It's using the same logic, and it's not yet built exactly in the same way. So that was a bit the introduction I wanted to give, and I'll leave the floor to Jennifer, and I believe we have a couple of questions, Alejandro, so we can diving in that direction.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. Thanks, GLTH, for inviting me to be here today. My name is Jennifer Woodard. I'm co-founder of Insikt AI. So we're a company that focuses on leveraging machine learning and all sorts of different AI technologies for detecting online harms. So things like terrorist-related content, crime, and we've been working in the area for about 10 years. We started doing this in the context of European research projects in which we're very involved. So I'm actually a speaker on this topic quite often, also on the topic of ethical AI. So we give a lot of kind of emphasis to the lack of bias, the kind of proposing a more transparency in how we use these models, especially in these types of high risk use cases, such as things like policing. I'm also kind of out there speaking about things like disinformation, all of the things that you're hearing about right now in mainstream media. So everybody that's talking about LLMs today are talking about the risks, right? And one of the main risks is disinformation. So that's something that we talk about a lot as well. And lastly, but importantly, I'm an advisor for the Global Legal Tech Hub in the area of AI. So I'm very happy to be a part of this roundtable and a part of the organization.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. So if we can start, and after what we saw from Greg, why would you explain, or how would you explain all this excitement recently about generative AI? What it changed fundamentally in the last, I would say in November, but up to you.
Yeah, why is it getting mainstream attention now, right? So I think one of the first reasons is a really simple one. So as Greg was saying, these LLMs have been around for a while. We've been working as a company with these for a while now, but it hasn't had this consumer-facing kind of interface before. So this is the first time that you're taking a large language model like the one given by OpenAI and setting it basically into the wild, and people are getting to play with it. So that's one of the things that I think has really changed. It's been a paradigm shift. Obviously, those of us who have been working in this area have been impressed by these language models since we've been working with them. They've been improving over the different GPTs, for instance, but the mainstream public had never really seen this. They had no reason to even know about this, right? So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is just inherent about how they work, right? They have very impressive results. The types of results that you get back, or that we got back, let's say, in a pre-LLM chatbot, were very robotic. They were not very specific, very ambiguous, and you knew that you were talking to a machine. But because these large language models are powering, these newfangled chatbots, what we're seeing is that you actually feel like you're talking to a person. So there is almost a human feeling to it, right? And of course, we know that having that human feeling also means that comes, mistakes as well. We've talked about things like hallucinations and lying. So, since these models have been trained on, basically, as Greg was saying, almost every part of the internet, it has a little bit of everything that from humankind, let's say. So it can contain bias, it can contain disinformation, it can contain lots of other good qualities as well, right? So we've also seen it do very show like human talents as well. So I think some of the first like mainstream media stories were around like, oh, it can, write poetry, or it can engage you in a rap battle and things like that. So I think people have just been really impressed by the fact that it's taken something very, very technical and made it almost very human-like.
Excellent. So, and before continuing with my questions, sorry, Greg, because I'm seeing some questions already. So we are going to answer questions from everybody, I would say, at the end of this presentation. I will have the privilege of asking some questions to Jennifer and Greg myself, and then we start with the everybody's question. Let's say 10 minutes before the end of the hour, we open the floor to everybody, okay, just for organization. Greg, would you like to say something?
Yes, yeah, no, just to add something to what Jennifer was saying. The interesting part of these LLMs, and again speaking about what we've seen from the legal industry, is really all the interest that this model got is really how sometimes accurate and what kind of quality people could expect from this. And obviously it's been a real learning curve and understanding, and until the very last recent developments where a fake president was quoted in court, which is obviously a very sad experience. But yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's very important to remind to everyone that this is still a beta version, so this is not a final product. Obviously, we highly recommend it. So that's a bit the disclaimer moment, but do not use it for professional purposes with serious matters, obviously. And a bit to deep dive in this hallucination part, and maybe something that we didn't clarify at the beginning on these LM is that it's about probability. So even though it's very good and it really captured, and I'm personally using it for drafting, it writes extremely well, I must say.
Yes, indeed.
Example generation, it's absolutely outstanding. So you get great things to use it as a boilerplate to generate examples of many different things, and that's absolutely just fine. But the bias that was introduced in this engine is really something that is really linked to its nature. It's been built to provide the most probable answer to a sentence that you just written here, but to make sure that it wouldn't generate exactly the same answer to similar questions, they added some piece of randomness. So this is not creativity, what you're seeing, it's randomness. So on top, for each question that you ask, it's the most probable case plus some level of randomness. This is what sometimes leads to this bias, which is called hallucination or hallucitation, to refer to the legal case that was quoted.
Excellent. And we might say, actually, so hallucinations is not a bug, it's something that it was introduced by default.
Yes, so come across and bypass this complexity, because it's part of the amazing thing of these LMs, that they do require this level of randomness to provide really genuine answers every single time.
Exactly. Jennifer, also, so we are starting to mention some of the key terms here. So we mentioned hallucination. Can you mention also or explain some other terms that we hear all the time, like prompts? It all depends on how good the prompt it is. So we are creating prompt databases and plugins, this new feature recently. Can you explain, please?
Yeah, no, so prompt engineering, everybody's talking about prompt engineering, right? So because it is a large language model and it's driven by the way we write, the way humans write, that is going to influence in the type of kind of answer that you get. So you can't, if you go to like a very typical NLP type of use case, which is doing a Google search, for instance, it's a different type of animal, right? And here what we want to do is figure out the ways to get the best possible answer using prompts. So it's just really kind of experimenting with the way you formulate questions, looking at the answers and understanding how to do that again in the best possible way to get the best answer out of ChatGPT or any of these types of platforms. And I don't know if you want to explain anything about plugins, Greg. I don't have to answer all of the questions.
Yeah, not sure if you have the question again, Alejandro, sorry.
Oh, the question, the plugins. What are these famous plugins? Because obviously, until recently, ChatGPT at least was blind, we might say, to what's going on the context, on reality. It has no facts, but recently that has changed. Now it has some eyes on, and so I was asking for some previews on the plugins.
That's what is very interesting with these plugins, and obviously there are developments, especially in the legal industry, and some of you may have heard of this initiative between PwC and Harvey, this startup that eventually developed something which is a bit more narrow. What is very interesting is how we create really some kind of a sub-level of knowledge, which is a bit more accurate, and at least on which we know what is the exact source of information that was used to provide an answer. So, and I believe, and it's a bit of a lucky guess at this stage because we don't know how the market would look like in 6 months or in 2 years or even less in 5. But there are different possibilities. Either the market will evolve with some kind of very large monopoly of big actors that will have the ability to fund and develop and keep feeding the monster of the LLMs that they have created, or eventually these big actors that have the ability to fund and to create these LLMs will somehow maintain a level as the base knowledge of expression, a bit like what we're seeing currently with ChatGPT, which is already very good in terms of linguistic and just writing and drafting, and on top of which smaller actors will really build specific experience for a specific audience with high quality information, at least that can be verified to serve as really a proper source of information. I believe that this is maybe what is very interesting with this plugin approach and how do we approach it. What we've seen recently is that the most recent versions of ChatGPT now have access to the entire web, especially I believe it's the pro version that you have. Same thing for Bard. But we're also seeing, and we're still at the very early stage. I mean, we're talking about months in these developments. We're seeing also small differences between the approaches of these LLMs between Bard and the others, with different capabilities that are emerging. So that's still very exciting to follow.
Super, thank you, Jennifer. We are talking about different players here. Who are the main players? And so the impact on society, you see much more an impact as a consumer, as publishers, as industry, as law firms, etc. Where do you see the impact of this technology?
Yeah, I think it's going to impact everything, right? It's kind of what we talked about. We've been talking about actually at the Global Legal Tech Hub for a few months now. AI is impacting everything. I don't see an area where it's not going to impact. And it actually goes beyond just kind of these large language models. We're seeing advances in other areas of AI. But if we speak specifically to this, look, very low-hanging fruit is just something I just mentioned. Search, right? This is going to impact search. This can make or break a company like Google, right? Because Google is primarily driven by search, the nature of search. There's going to be a paradigm shift with search. That's just one example. Obviously, it will impact legal technology. We're already talking about the different areas that could impact startups. The access that startups will now have to the ability to implement AI, sophisticated AI. We've never seen this before, right? So there is going to be kind of an arms race at the top level with, the huge players, and then a democratization that's kind of trickling down to the smaller companies where you're actually be able to build tools with sophisticated AI models that were not previously available to you on a low budget, basically. And I'm also seeing a kind of a commodification of these types of models, right? I think Greg was getting into this, but like the ability to kind of build models that are very specific for very specific sectors and verticalize that is also another way for, smaller companies or even larger companies to kind of make a profit off of that. So I think that's another area that's interesting. And then finally, this is really going to impact regulation and government. I mean, we'll get into it, I think, probably later, but there's a lot of considerations that we need to take into account. Things that are already being, debated and approved on at the European level, and even at the US level being spoken about right now. These are really, really important things. And then lastly, since we're talking about legal stuff, I think there are some serious IP implications as well in terms of creation. So I'd love to hear from you guys about that on the legal side. What is ownership? What is the actual work? Who actually owns it? Those types of considerations, I think, are really important.
Excellent, thanks. So the impact is everywhere. Greg, where do you see the impact specifically? We're starting to talk about legal for law firms, corporate departments, pieces of law versus practice of law. Where do you see some examples of this impact?
So obviously it starts always with the different use cases that we see with this type of technology for legal practitioners. The most obvious one is generating content, which is the most obvious one. Drafting, generating things, documents, reviewing documents, extracting information from large amount of documents, information. So obviously, all lawyers see very obvious use cases for discovery purposes, for so many different things. Obviously, and rightfully, everyone is a bit scared of where does this information is going at the moment. And I wouldn't recommend to anyone, unless you own a private instance of any kind of these LLMs, to use it with sensitive data. But the output that we are seeing at the moment with the different examples and all the testing that's been happening right now tends to prove that the use cases are very interesting. What it does say for legal professionals, and that's a bit the part which I find very interesting, is that just beyond the excitement around all these models is a bit, I think it says a lot about how people want to interact with their information in the future and with their legal information, and going probably from solutions where really the software just doesn't understand what the end user is trying to do until it has performed the entire action, where these large models can anticipate and create functional paths for these people going into a specific environment. So I think that somehow in the long term, it says that we're moving away from solutions where you have a really large scope of toolbox with many different capabilities and actions, but rather maybe just one prompt in the middle saying, hey, what would you like to do today? And these solutions building would need a functional path. Say, so, well, here it is. I want to onboard a new shareholder in my company. So we have to hold that thing. We have to issue new shares, and we have to do so many different things. So to create really these functional paths. So this, I believe, says a lot about what kind of impact we can expect. Now, on how we can use it, and we're currently conducting with the European Legal Technology Association a very large survey on the impact of generative AI and legal professionals. And we're still in the early stages of the study, but we have a bit more than 100 respondents already. And the most interesting part is we had two similar questions. The first is, so what do you think will be, on which practice areas you think generative AI will have the largest impact? And the same question is about what do you want actually generative AI to have the strongest impact on? And obviously answers are slightly different, but what was very unexpected is that on the first answer, they think that it will have a very large impact on finding information, on generating documents, but they want it to have more impact on addressing customer needs, so to provide legal services. So somehow to rely on their own expertise to automate a bit more what is provided to the end user, to the legal consumer. That's also very interesting. So we see we'll have a bit more of information along the way, and once we release the survey, I think will be late June, early July. But it's really a change in paradigm and for legal professionals to start using these tools.
Thank you. And by the way, obviously, what you just mentioned about access to justice, that's why we have the fourth table dedicated to access to justice, all these technologies, how they could improve the Q&A function about to know our own rights, right? So I'm looking forward to that one too. You have had a very, I would say, responsible approach, Greg. So very, and that's something obviously that's the way to move forward. Let's take this question about, and I'm seeing some questions also from the public. So let's start talking about risk and measures to avoid this risk, and maybe obviously I'm reading one of the questions from Nicholas Ricketts asking very specifically key components for a good ethical guidance or good ethical code of conduct about AI implementation. So most probably we are going to see something again in the second and third roundtable, but Jennifer, if you could start introducing us to this subject.
Yeah, so ethical components, it's nothing new to talk about AI ethics. I mean, basically when we talk about it at the European Commission level, we talk about 7 requirements that AI systems need to have. So that's that they should be trustworthy, they should have human agency and oversight, they should have technical robustness, privacy, data governance, transparency, diversity, discrimination and fairness, non-discrimination and fairness. Those are the ones that we consider the standard of AI ethics at the European level. Now, obviously, all of these things can be interpreted in different ways. So what is fairness? You know, what is a level of human agency? So it's still an open debate. I mean, I've been on panels talking about this again and again, and not everyone has the same point of view. It's also, it can also be cultural, right? And if we talk about this from a cultural standpoint, there are other areas of the world that don't abide by or wish to abide by these types of ethical guidelines. So that's kind of where the convergence of AI ethics and AI governance kind of come together, I think.
That's excellent.
Just a comment on this, because it has also a very close link to legal topics. Is if we want to have, and the large part of these LM is about actually having a proper training set to be able to learn on very large amounts of information. So if we look at the legal industry, the only way to learn on large amounts of information is to have access to cases, to have access to contracts, to documents, to any kind of legal documents. And this is where we touch really the privacy topic. And there's one thing that goes beyond just generative AI and AI. It's really the technologies existing today to run properly anonymization of documents, either from court decisions or from anything else. Till date, and I don't know if you've seen anything in close to that, Jennifer, but to my knowledge, that we don't have today solutions that exist available to the market to anyone to properly and to guarantee 100% of anonymization of legal documents. It just doesn't exist.
I don't think in any sophisticated way. So we've been involved in projects that involve, you know, pseudo anonymization, obfuscating information and things like that. But yes, I do think that that's kind of an open area, and obviously for respecting these ethical tenets, that's definitely something that needs to be worked on further.
A very, very sensitive topic and something to have in mind. But this also applies to existing AI engines that look very much old-fashioned now, but it's still very relevant. But any kind of AI that you would use for contract review, for example, still works on pretty much the same basis.
That's excellent. Thanks. Keeping Greg on the floor. So something, well, responsible AI is one thing, but I'm seeing something that worries me a lot. People that are saying that it has such an impact, generative AI, on all product verticals that we are used to in the legal market. So document management system, collaboration tools, online research, practice management system, document automation, etc. So we have been working, many of us, in adopting so many of these technologies. And it seems that now we have one technology that will force us to review all our technology stack. Is this an exaggeration? Is something true? What can you say about?
So it is interesting, because if we look at the legal tech industry, what happened over the past 5 to 6 years is that we had a huge acceleration in the development of new features and capacities of tools for legal professionals at a pace which was much higher than the acceleration of the maturity of legal professionals themselves. So what just happened over the past 5 years is that we just actually have widened the gap between maturity of legal professionals and the current state of legal technologies. So we're not very much helping in that sense. So legal professionals are still catching up, and the first barrier to get to Legaltech to start implementing information is to have a proper structured information in your organization. It's a basic step. If you don't know where your information is, if you don't know what it is, how it's stored, how it's structured, etc., or if it's still paper, and it's very much the case in many organizations, there is not much you can do with technologies that exist today. And I'm putting aside generative AI for a second, because we need to have structured information. What is very interesting with generative AI is that we can turn unstructured data into structured data, which is currently very difficult for 99% of the tools that exist on the market. Even though we're trying to bridge that gap, it's the first and the most complex step of any kind of implementation of software for organizations. So what really generative AI is disrupting here is how easy it would, and I hope it will become, to access really that kind of technologies. You wanted to add something, Jennifer?
No, I totally agree with everything you're saying.
Okay.
But it's a complicated question, actually, that I receive a lot, actually.
It
What
is,
should we do now, right? Because most of the technologies around that ChatGPT and generative AI are not mature enough. So
No,
one
sure.
thing is
Yeah,
to have a
exactly.
proof of concept, and one thing is to have a production ready.
Yes. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's not
sure.
just about tech stack, it's also about having internal resources to maintain these types
Mhm.
of things. So, I mean, do you have a machine learning expert at your law firm? Probably not. So these types of things also need to be taken into consideration.
True.
And to a really short answer for all law firms, legal professionals in-house or counsels, it doesn't mean that you need to stop all your existing tech implementations at the moment. Honestly, just don't. Just keep going, because what you're building now, you're building it for the future as well. And
Right.
at the moment, there is no mature solution that exists relying on these LLMs that is robust and strong and reliable enough to say, yes, this is really the solution that you'll use for the next 20 years. Definitely not. But it's changing the way all solutions on the market are approaching the access to your data.
Excellent, thanks. So, and continue this conversation, because obviously I had a list of questions, but I'm actually distracted also. I'm very curious about the questions that we are receiving from the public. And we said this is a community, so I just follow the community, what is taking us. One of the questions is exactly about resources, as Jennifer was mentioning. And one of the, I'm very passionate about this one. So is legal education ready to prepare our lawyers, to prepare law students? Even are we as knowledge management people prepared to train the people that can actually get the benefits of these technologies, starting with legal education? That is something I'm
Yeah.
particularly fond of. What should change if the universities, how universities should accept that this world has changed?
I'll get this started just because it builds off of something that I was involved in, a conversation I was involved in a couple of months ago. So I was leading a roundtable for the UN AI for Good. We were talking specifically with 2 law school professors and their students about how they should be using and implementing AI in the classroom. And it was so interesting to hear the perspective from all of them. And the conclusion we actually came to were, obviously there's some very specific things that, you know, budding or promising legal professionals or new legal professionals need to know. But at the end of the day, it's all about how we're integrating these technologies into education as a whole, like in general. So how should we be being taught or how should we be teaching our students, let's say, to critically think? So you cannot depend on these types of tools for studying, for learning, for understanding the way we've learned and studied in the past, right? So there was a big kind of conversation around, you know, how much we should rely on them and how much we should tell students to not rely on them, and how much, you know, digging and own, you know, research and investigation they should be doing on their own. Because at the end of the day, it's really easy to just have these tools do whatever you need them to do, you know, write up a contract or, you know, basically help them study. But I think that the critical thinking skills will be in peril if we continue to, or if we begin to rely too heavily on these tools in terms of classroom scenarios, specifically in university and maybe even in law schools.
Thanks. Greg, would you like to?
Yes, no, couldn't agree more with Jennifer. Honestly, it just cultivates really the critical thinking of everyone to have this. So, but now stepping in the shoes of a law student at the moment, investing and taking loans, especially in the US, North America, for their law studies, and seeing what is happening now, I would be a bit freaked out, to be honest. I'd say, right, hold on, I'm investing. I mean, I'll be paying back my law degree for years and maybe probably for a couple of decades. And right now, we're seeing tools coming out on the market that are practically doing what I'm expected joining a law firm as a young associate. So what is my added value here?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is what is very important to have in mind is, as much as when large publishers started to release the first search engines for precedents and cases and really legal information and doctrine, uh, many people thought it was the end of many different legal professionals and people in organizations and law firms really, in charge of documentation and information. These jobs didn't just disappear; they just changed, and that's a bit what is happening right now. And the same thing will apply to these young law students at the moment. That will become something a bit different, and probably something, I mean, with job titles that we don't even know will exist in a couple of years.
Absolutely. I think that it's a convergence of the conversation as a whole of the future of work, right? Whether or not this will help or harm people that are coming into the workforce, because in many cases, it's going to require upskilling. Upskilling is not available to everyone. I'm glad you brought up the student loan thing, Greg, because that's something that comes up a lot in this conversation. It's like the investment that some students have to make in their education, only to see it kind of equated by a machine. It can be very daunting.
Yes, it is. And so somehow, yes, these engines will and these tools will probably replace a couple of lawyers, but I mean, they will be replaced by people who know how to use these tools, which is very different. So it's not just we're hiring a couple of machines to do the jobs of people that are currently working in-house. It's about knowing how to use it. So as much as we're learning at law school, really the syllogism of law and how it works and the critical thinking, these people and universities need to also educate legal professionals on this computational thinking. How does these machines work, and how can it help? And I believe that this is becoming very, very critical.
Yeah, and what is the added value of the lawyer as well? I think that's another topic that comes up a lot. So if we talk about equating or kind of simulating legal services or legal opinions, it's an existential question, I guess.
And on taking advantage of this, obviously, so that's the impact on legal education. And our president is writing one of the questions here, and he's asking, okay, that's the impact on legal education. And then what's the impact on the consumer? Finally, legal tech or generative AI could be that tool that we have been promising for B2C, so business to consumer, and will open really adoption and legal knowledge to the consumers. What do you think?
Yeah, we had actually another plug for the Legal Tech Hub. We had a really nice event at the Mobile World Congress in which this was actually the topic of discussion, right? So how is AI going to enable B2C legal tech? And that was the conclusion that we arrived at, that it can definitely accelerate these services in many ways, because it's going to allow law firms to scale their services in ways that they haven't been able to before. So it definitely is an open door, in my opinion.
Just to introduce also a bit of a distinction here, and I believe that the answer will be slightly different between common law and civil law countries, because we don't have the same approach to the provision of legal services. Especially in continental Europe, we a structured way with this monopoly for legal provision, which is very justified, and I understand how this works. But the question of the consumer grade artificial intelligence for legal services is something that will generate, I believe, a lot of precedent and a lot of litigation for the coming year in civil law countries. And it's probably the responsibility here and the role of the European Commission to come up with something which is really aligned with market standards of what exists in terms of technology, to make sure that it is equipped, and to make sure that countries don't have to go once again in an endless battle against technology providers, because we're already getting into very gray areas when it comes to extracting information. Now that these technologies generate an output, this is obviously very, very different. I'm just putting myself now back again in the shoes of an in-house counsel, for example. I'm using just a private instance of ChatGPT, so I'm not even using it with a public instance. I'm really investing in something a bit different. But what I'm looking for here is I have hundreds of contracts that I'm creating myself. And what I'm looking at is to make sure that I can start creating some kind of a set of standards of my clauses. I just like to have an analysis of the similarities between the ways I've been drafting this specific contract for the customers in our organization. So what I'm expecting from the tool is to come up with a good middle ground for a couple of standard clauses that I'm expecting to have a contract playbook. That's typically something you would hire a law firm for, but that's now something you could certainly use generative AI to do with a very different level of accuracy, because law firm would probably embrace the entire specificity and the legal framework and everything you can expect, but you would have probably reasonable level of quality, at least something you can work with. I wouldn't recommend it in any way, but still, I mean, that's still something someone could do. Now we're talking about legal professionals doing something like this, but what about any kind of private individual wanting to do something like that? Saying, I don't have the money, I just don't want to pay for a law firm to do that kind of thing. I'd like actually the AI to just analyze my lease that I'm about to sign to tell me if there is anything doubtful, wrong that is in there. What can you do about something like that? So if bar associations locally just fight it back, I mean, this will end up in, again, a very long battle of precedents and countries, again, not aligning between different jurisdictions and eventually leading to some kind of ban of certain versions of these AIs. So we'll probably have to make sure that bar associations really discuss and find a common ground to understand a bit more how do we address the monopoly of legal professions of services in the future.
Super, thank you. So questions keep coming. I suggest to do the typical question while I review more questions, if there is anything missing. The typical questions. I'm not going to ask you how we are going to be in what's going to happen until October, because that's too easy for both of you. But let's see that I would like to introduce myself to start getting ready for this revolution. Can you create like a roadmap, like a personal or professional roadmap for the next year? Where should I start, and what should I be doing?
Who specifically? You, a legal professional, or
A legal profession? Yeah, you're right. Sorry, as a legal profession.
I mean, maybe Greg is more in the legal area, but I think becoming informed on these technologies in general for any sector that's adopting something new like this is really, really important. Not just understanding how they work, but also the risks that are involved, the inherent risks that are involved in the implementation, some of the ones that we've already talked about. Like, so for instance, unless you're using a specific instance of something like this, you should not be giving it access to any kind of sensitive data. But I think really bringing on the expertise as well. So if you don't have the ability to implement or fully understand how to implement these things, bring on someone who's an expert who can actually tell you what are the kind of white spaces or black holes that you may not be seeing. But this doesn't just go for the legal profession; it goes for anyone who wants to adopt these types of technologies.
Thanks.
Agreed. Really, it's about following what is happening on that domain, and I think we can expect many different things to evolve in the coming months, and certainly the coming year. It's very hard for AI companies, and we have AI engineers working the team. It's very hard to assess where we want to be 1 year from now. Things are really moving pretty fast. So it's about understanding what is happening. I think we're past the fantasy of robot lawyers or technology trying to replace anyone. So it's really about how can you make the best out of these technologies, and very brilliant things will come out of this. So I believe that the right thing to do at the moment for legal professionals is to assess how they are in terms of technology, to make sure also teams are aligned with technology, have some kind of harmonization at the level of maturity. The first thing that will hold you back from implementing technologies is the rest of the team, not having really a proper change management in place. So the better everyone's prepared to do something like that, the better it will be for your implementation process. And last is really about having a good really a good grasp over your data internally. How can you get prepared to organize and structure your information, and where do you want to start? I guess that this would be my recommendation.
Excellent, thank you. So we have just one last minute to wrap up. I think it's impossible to do a recap of everything we cover. I thank so much, Jennifer, Greg, for your for sharing your knowledge, and also many. It was a very interesting question, very interesting session, because we have many doubts, even ourselves, about what's going to happen. So it's so good to keep growing and learning together. So that's my recap. I invite everybody to continue this conversation. Many of the questions and many of the doubts we might say we have, maybe on getting our data ready. That is next session on Wednesday. We can cover some of that. One of the speakers loves to talk about how to put the ingredients in order so you make the right cake. And so we are going to be talking about how to make cakes, and how to also, we have invited Sally Alliance, I mean Real, and we are going to be talking about more how to structure the data and how to add to enrich the data with metadata. So that's all for today. I'm so happy. It seems that we have been live and online for 1 hour, so it's a success already. So thanks a lot again, Jennifer, Greg.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.